Hi, everyone. Sarah and Teresa joining you again. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Sarah.
We're uh, we're eager to jump into the topic
Mm,
that we are going to talk about. And as you know from our first recorded conversation a few weeks ago, we are periodically just going to hop on and have conversations and talk about things that are current in the news related to the
mhm,
workforce, things that are questions that are coming up to us from
mm.
our clients and people we
Yep.
support, and then just have a dialogue around it. And as we're talking and as you're listening, maybe think about what's coming up for you. What questions do you have? What thoughts and perspectives would you add to it? What differences of opinions might you have? And just to engage. So we're going to hop in, and it builds on our first conversation, which was exploring the whole quiet quitting, which I mean I I'm a little bit to a point of like I'm tired of I'm not
Mm,
tired of talking about setting healthy boundaries. I am not
mm.
tired of talking about paying people properly and treating them with respect and
Yeah.
creating inclusive environments. Um, but the language game has just
Oh,
taken
yeah.
off and diluted and removed responsibility and done lots of things. So we were sent this article that was published back on September 15th, so just a few days ago on SHRM's
Mhm.
website. And the title is Quiet Firing is Not the Antidote to Quiet Quitting.
Mm.
Teresa, thoughts? Because I have so many.
I mean, where do you start? I I'll tell you, I was thinking about, have I been quietly fired?
Hmm.
And I thought of one very specific example where I felt I had been quietly fired. Um, and what sticks out to me about that situation is the assumptions they must have been making about me based on some of the treatment or the actions or the um, uh, maybe purposeful exclusion that happened
Mm,
because
mm.
I wasn't thinking of leaving quietly or otherwise. I was in the game, but when I look back on it, I feel like, wow, they were must have been holding a lot of assumptions about me as a worker,
Mm.
um, to make some of the changes that they made. So that was my first thought.
Yeah, no,
Sarah,
that,
go for it.
I mean, no, I want to make a note so we can come back to
Yeah.
the assumptions.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, there's no such thing as quiet firing.
No.
It's retaliation.
Mm,
Let's be very, very clear, because the way that people are describing it when they've been interviewed or surveys is that, just looking at this article, they said some managers are responding by using quiet firing practices. According to
mm,
resumebuilder.com survey, that
mm.
1 in 3 managers are
Ooh.
using passive aggressive tactics to make
Mm,
work uncomfortable for the employee in
mm.
hopes that the quiet quitter will just leave.
I
Okay.
love that. And let's have a fun statistics moment. Those are the ones who self-reported. They were honest enough to check a
Right.
box that said,
Right.
I am absolutely passive aggressive when working with an employee. I went to, it was like, let's just bask in that one for a minute.
That's a really great point, because it could be higher. And
Yeah.
so again, folks, uh quiet firing isn't a
Mm.
thing. That is called retaliation or
Or
creating a
or
hostile work environment.
yeah, just and like at its most basic form, horrible management. I mean, like it's horrible.
I mean, we we're laughing about it not because it's funny, but
No, it's
because
not
it
funny.
feels so ludicrous to me anyway,
Yes.
that we're
Mhm.
at this point and we're talking about it. Now, that said, it is important for us to talk about retaliation. It is
Mm.
critical for us to talk about creating a toxic work environment. And
Yeah.
if you are showing up in
Mhm.
ways where you go, I'm just going to make it so awful for this person
Mm.
that they will
Oh,
leave,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
want you to get real curious and clear about your
Yep.
intention. I want you to get real clear and curious about accountability.
Mm,
about what's the impact that you want to make, and what are you gaining from it? Because
mm,
when I hear someone's like, well, I'm just going to make it so bad that they're not going to want to stay, one, that tells me a whole host of things, that
mm,
you're not a good manager, and possibly in this moment you're not behaving like a good human. um,
mm,
you aren't taking responsibility or accountability
mhm.
to set
Yep.
expectations, to clearly coach somebody, to give them the
Mm,
feedback that they need, to have the conversation you need to be having with them that you clearly aren't. There's also an element for me, and I'm trying to think in my own career
mm,
if I've certainly seen moments of, I've definitely seen retaliation. We'll say that,
mm.
like, for sure. And if I'm being honest with myself, there's probably times when I retaliated and wasn't conscious of it, or it was unchecked, and
Yeah.
right. Um, or was conscious of it, but wasn't going to take ownership for it at the time. Let's be
Mm,
very real there.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but uh, it's always interesting to me, um, that people feel like their hands are tied. And it's
Mm,
like, well, first of all, if you think this person, this worker, and we're going to get back to your point you were making of like
yeah. Yep.
assumptions, um, is not doing the job you need, then you need to have
Right.
that conversation, and there needs to be accountability in that perspective, right? And we also need to think about bias, and right, all of those
Mhm.
things play into it. But yeah, I don't even know what the point I want to make is, other just that it's you're retaliating. If you're acting passive aggressively, if you are doing things that aren't related to clear, uh, candid, compassionate, kind, or even just direct communication, um, that's just a form of retaliation.
And it feels like a great moment to for all of us to remind ourselves that we control how we show up. We don't control the actions of the other folks.
Mm,
So if you're seeing something that you think is less than, you don't meet that by also being less than.
mm,
And that's what it feels like even in the title of this article. You're meeting something that maybe isn't great with something that really isn't great.
mm.
That I don't understand. It's like it does not compute for me.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
for the relationship, for the worker, for the manager, for the company, I mean, that feels very short-sighted.
yeah, yeah. There's almost an element of, like, again, that power over,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
of like, I'm going to
Sure.
manipulate the situation. Essentially, I'm going to create harm
Mhm.
so that it's so painful for you, you will then leave. Just like, listen to that for a second. If you have
Yeah.
found yourself in this situation, if you maybe are coaching somebody in this situation, if my intention is to raise the heat in an unhealthy way, what I'm essentially setting out to do is to harm you to the
Mm,
point where you will leave.
mm,
And is that the impact that you want to make? Is that
mm.
how you want to show up? And again, get really curious and clear about answering that question of, and
Yeah.
why, and what does that give you, and what are you like, how are you benefiting from showing up in that way?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, one of the things you were talking about, Teresa, in the beginning was just the assumptions in your experience that people were making. And I think that, again, this phrase "quiet quitting" has been used in a lot of different situations. And are there people, um, who may feel frustrated, maybe are also coming from a place of feeling vindictive, or what have you, of wanting to, uh potentially, like, I don't want to say sabotage, but I'm going to do,
Yeah. Bare
I'm
minimum, like
bare minimum, or I'm going to make it look like I'm doing
less
bare
than the
minimum, right?
yeah, yeah.
Do
Make
they
something take
exist?
way longer than it needs
Right.
to just so I can kind of be I mean, clearly we've all worked with those folks, but they
Yeah.
are a really tiny percentage of workers.
Yeah. The vast majority of people who we see who are, uh and again, it was happening pre-pandemic, and it became clear,
Mhm.
is just I'm going to be okay meeting expectations,
Yeah.
right? I think I mentioned this last time, but I remember having a leader go, sometimes it's okay to meet expectations. And I was so
Yeah.
just like, I never thought about that because I always wanted to, right, be
Mm.
more, do more, have people be, perceive the value that I bring. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like a conversation that always comes up is, yeah, you are going to have people who will go above and beyond, who want to
Hmm. Yeah.
contribute more. They're really excited about the work. They're really motivated by what's happening. And then you'll always have people who are really good. I mean, I hate the term worker bees because I just don't like that language, but a lot of times that's how you'll
Yeah.
hear people say it, is like they
Yeah.
come in, they get the job done, they're
Yeah.
consistent, they're, whatever,
Yeah. Just a very proficient employee, just very
yeah.
proficient. Yeah.
And you need those, like we need people
Hmm.
kind of in all phases and all cycles of where they are in their career
Oh,
and their
yeah.
drive and their values. Um, and I can't help but wonder how many more assumptions
Mm.
people in positions of power and authority might be making
Mm.
because there's been such a focus on this idea of essentially setting boundaries at work and just like meeting the expectations. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
No, I think uh, I'm chewing on a lot of things you said, and it keeps coming back to assumptions, right? For me, because the I guess I'm making the assumption that they're not talking about it. If the perception is that the quitting is quiet, then the firing becomes quiet. So there's no,
Mm,
in fact, the quiet part could be that no one's talking about it, not that it's happening under the radar,
mm,
right? But
mhm,
um, and when I think about something that you just said, but about setting boundaries, that's a great time for checking your bias.
mhm,
Am I applying the belief that everyone who is like me is oh, grade A, doing it, killing it, nailing it, passionate above and beyond, and the people not like me aren't? How am I drawing those lines? And I guess even replaying more of my own situation, you know, I, I can't not mention that I was pregnant at the time,
mm,
right? And so we know pregnant women face many obstacles in the workplace, many of which related to other people's ideas or assumptions about them, their commitment, what's going to happen after. And so I'm wondering what role people's beliefs, past experience translated, just cut and paste onto this experience, relates to that.
we do a lot of work on assumptions and
Hmm.
right. And we know there's the whole familiarity bias, right? I'm more likely
Yes.
to promote or to align with people who look, sound,
Hmm.
and behave like me, where there's that familiarity. What are when we think about, so let's say somebody's listening to this and they're
Mm.
maybe like, oh, that's me, but I
Mm.
have a really good reason, why I, or whatever
Oh,
the case.
yeah. Why I'm doing a quiet firing?
Yeah,
Why I'm
yeah.
engaged in it? Got it. Okay.
Um, you know, I want to look at it through sort of two lenses. Internally, what are some, like, you already started to hit on them. What are some biases we should be
Hmm.
aware of? What are some questions we should be asking? Because I remember when I was first when I first got into when I was in my first supervisory role.
Mm.
I was such a I mean, I was such a go-getter. I was such a whatever I can do to exceed expectations, right? To
Mm.
rise to the top and do whatever, that I
Sure.
I would struggle with people who weren't like me. I couldn't understand why
Hmm.
you wouldn't want to work hard to get the A, to right, to exceed expectations. And obviously as I started to live my life and increase awareness and all of that, there's thousands of reasons why somebody may
Sure.
go, "Well, this is I'm going to give it this energy, I'm not going to give it that
Hmm.
energy," and there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that. But when we think about putting ourselves in the position of being the person in management who might be feeling frustrated, with maybe what is the reality or perception
Mm,
that people may be doing less
mm.
than they were before or less than what we expect. Internally, what are some good reflection questions for folks to consider, things to be aware of?
You know, the first thing that's coming to my mind for the manager is reflecting on how you got to your management role.
Mm,
Because what we know about managers is they're often technically very proficient. They were likely the highest performer in the group. Um, they may be shocked that not everyone, almost like the story you were telling, like, why isn't everyone doing? But I'm sharing that in terms of um, historically, managers haven't been as versed in the people side, right? Which is what you and I are so passionate about helping managers with. But um, so I think for them to think about what is the people side of this problem, I'm going to have to get curious about.
mm,
Because I think there might be a default to, if I tighten the reins on this process, if I ask for more things to be submitted this way, if I review everything that's going out, right? That kind of work back to the work stream, as opposed to what's the human side on the other end of this that I might not be considering? That's the first thing that's
mm,
coming up for
mm.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, we know that some companies have over rotated and they have
Yes.
tracking on their team member
Yes.
sites, or, different ways that they're trying to monitor not the output, but how much
Hmm.
time they're doing something. And, and the thing is if you are coming into this relationship with that team member from a place of distrust, then further doubling
Yeah.
down on behavior that is showing them that you don't trust them isn't going to move the needle towards greater trust. It'll just continue to deepen the distrust.
Yeah.
And I actually just posted something on Twitter about this, um, and related to this of if that's the position I'm coming into. I mean, a couple of things are true. I as the manager may feel a lot of stress because I
Hmm.
don't feel the level of trust and I'm creating stress. And when somebody is in stress mode, they're going to be in survival mode, which means they're not going to be able to partner with you. They aren't going to be able to be as creative or as innovative or collaborative or whatever
Mm,
the case might be. And I think that a good check too is, yeah, what story am I telling myself? And one of the things that can be so seductive for our brain and assumptions is to go, yep, and these are, Sarah, I can come up with 3
mm,
examples
hmm.
of what will validate it. And
Yeah.
I invite you to think about, and what are 3 times that it is invalidated,
Yeah.
right? What else might be going on in their world? What kind of conversations can we have? I mean, this goes into our curiosity first approach of like getting curious with
Hmm.
yourself and then getting curious about others. And then from the standpoint of really reflecting on,
Hmm.
are we clear about expectations?
Right.
Are we clear about, are we on the same page with what productivity means and looks
Right.
like? Is there an opportunity for us to question the status quo of only measuring time and not necessarily measuring output? Um,
Hmm.
as a manager, if you are noticing disengagement, the first place you need to look is yourself.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
are there things that we as individuals bring to the table and need to be held accountable for? Absolutely. And I can tell you from our experience of working with teams, the teams that struggle with disengagement
Mm,
also have really low levels of trust with their direct supervisors. They have low levels of
absolutely.
trust with each other. The ones that have high level of engagement have super high levels of trust, and they're really intentional about building that.
Hmm.
And so just some like quick things to think about as a check is, are the expectations clear? Um, is there an opportunity? Does the team member have the resources they need in order to be successful?
Yeah.
Um, have you appreciated them recently?
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Recognition goes a long
mm,
way.
Huge way. Are you including team members on important projects? Are you looking for opportunities to develop and to strengthen and to expand? And and are you respecting them, right? Like, And I mean, we are focused on the leader in part because, this is part of their job. I mean, this is their
Mhm.
job and they have a ton of influence and control. And then I guess, we can look at this through the lens of the team member of like, if you're struggling, you know, what do you need to get curious about? What do you need in this situation? And maybe it is a situation where you go, I don't have any other options. This isn't an
Mm.
ideal situation. I'm going to do what I need to do to show up,
Mhm.
to do, like a good enough job. And then I'm going to leave because I don't have other opportunities. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be able to leave or whatever the case might be. What else comes up for you, Teresa, as we just explore this topic?
I think a reminder for the person in the formal position of leadership that everyone will be watching how your interaction goes. Your best people will not be insulated from the way you handle this person who may be decentralizing work from their identity or establishing a healthy boundary, or maybe really is struggling with whether to work here or not. And there's neither of those things are evil, right? So
Mm,
everyone will be watching. And I think a good reminder that trust is damaged even on the periphery.
mm,
Trust but between you and I could be damaged based on how you address that person, even if I'm not particularly fond of them, because we go to, ooh, could that be me?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's the ripple of retaliation is it
Yep.
doesn't just impact the person who you might be targeting.
Hmm.
But if other people start to become aware of it, even if it's not like a conscious thought, the seed is planted of, would you do that
Hmm.
to me? And that's the other thing that, we've talked about and are working on an article is the retaliation doesn't feel like retaliation to us when we're the ones doing it. It feels justified. It feels,
Appropriate, almost, some people
yeah.
might say.
Yeah, they
You
did
earned
this.
this outcome. Yes,
Mm,
you picked the behavior, you picked the
mhm,
consequence, right?
mm.
Well,
So
and the
yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go
The
ahead.
other unintended consequence of retaliation, beyond damaging trust with people you're not intending to damage trust with, or the flip side, the other people watching think this is okay here.
Mm,
Uh, that it's assumed that this is how we can treat one another all the time. So you have to remember everyone is watching.
mm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, and real quickly, when we say retaliation isn't always obvious.
Mm.
It isn't always, I'm mad at Teresa, therefore I'm going to retaliate against her and pass her over for this promotion because she didn't sign up for the extra work or whatever the
Yeah.
situation might be. And so it's much more subtle and much more nuanced, right? It could be passing someone over for promotion. It could be not giving somebody opportunities to help them develop. It could be something as simple.
Repeatedly ignoring their
Yeah.
emails, not giving
Yep.
them the timely responses
Mhm.
they're relying on.
Yeah, that's something that we see a lot. Like I just don't even respond to them. Right?
Hmm.
Like I'm just not even I'm not gonna give them the time of day. They'll get it when they get it. Right. And
Hmm.
really they're making a point. Um, Ignoring them in meetings. Right. And
Hmm.
again, it's not like, oh, I don't want to, you can be looking at someone nodding and smiling and in your head going, none, I don't agree with anything you're saying. So I'm going to just discount it. And we have to remember there are real consequences to retaliation, and especially when you're a person in a position of power and authority,
Yeah.
real consequences to someone's livelihood, to their
Hmm.
sense of self, to again to the point you were making, Teresa, other people who are watching, how
Hmm.
they show up with it. So what's the central point of what we're chatting about here? If you're talking about
Uh,
quiet firing,
I
don't.
think yeah, rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
Go, what would the best you do? How would you respond with the person you respect the most watching? And it's probably not ignoring the other person. It's probably talking to them.
Mm, mm. That's a great practice. Like what's the best version of you and how
Yeah.
does that person show up in this moment?
Yeah.
Um, and we would like to, would love to hear from you. What's the experience that you've had? As I mentioned, Teresa and I we are interested in exploring this idea of retaliation. So if you have a story that you would like to
Mm.
share
Yeah.
anonymously, let us know. We're
Yep.
working on an article to hopefully publish in some larger publications, and we would love to hear from you or hear your perspective and maybe where it's different. And obviously we can't cover everything here because we could have a whole conversation on, so what if we have someone who is
Mm.
a poor performer? What if we have somebody who is a team member who is um, actively resisting, if you will, right? And it's clear and it's obvious. And what do we do in those situations? But for now, uh, let's just get real curious about the language we're using.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
and I love that practice of like at your best self.
Mhm.
What does that look like? And how do you want to show up in a way that, the other person deserves, the relationship deserves, and you deserve?
Yeah.
Final thoughts, Teresa.
Always love these conversations. Excited to hear from people.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd love to hear from you. We really mean that.
Yeah. So shoot us a message
Mhm.
at, you can send it to hello@sarahnoelwilson.com, and Teresa and I will both see it. So thanks for joining us, folks, talking about this topic. We'll see you again. Bye.
Bye.